way as a part of the larger vision. And then 1,100 acres of environmental cleanup. So we know that this was an old rail corridor, and all of the railroads are probably over 100 years old. It predated EPA and those things. And so inevitably when there's improvements or new construction, there's a certain amount of cleanup that's being done. And so that's a certain level of brownfield remediation that's being done along the way, right? So it's cleaning up areas that have been laying contaminant in some areas and degrees of that. There is 48,000 construction jobs that will be generated either through us or through new projects that are developed along the Beltline, and then 50,000 permanent jobs. The objective is that the larger project over time will generate $10 billion in private economic development investment, and then affordable housing, right? And our goal is the mandate is 5,600 units of affordable housing, but our team is working feverishly to get us to that and beyond. And he could talk a little bit about some of the goals and how we've reached that in the last couple of years and at a more accelerated rate. So tonight, I talked about the cards and just conversation agreements. You know, everyone is passionate about this, and we get it, right? So we're like, want to make sure we have the passion, but we also want to make sure that in our cards and your comments that everyone has a voice, and that's why we're actually asking you to document that so we can have a record, and then that we can navigate all the other spaces. We're going to embrace diverse perspective. We're not, everyone's not going to think alike or have the same perspective, and we respect that. We want to maintain a respectful space, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to work together over time. This is one of many meetings. This is not the first and won't be back for several months. This will take a series of months of engagement, and then we'll be mindful of the time because we want to make sure we can get as many questions asked by 8 o'clock, and whatever questions that may not be asked, and they'll reiterate this later, will be documented and put on as an FAQ on our website, but we're going to try to get as many as possible. And so I just want to reiterate, you know, that the Atlanta Beltline remains committed to advancing the redevelopment crossing and bringing all of the original goals for that site to fruition. And that's working in collaboration with Oakland City, Adair Park, Capitol View, Bush Mountain, and the nearby neighborhoods. Many of you may have participated 2 weeks ago in the stakeholder meeting. And so that same presentation is the same presentation we're doing tonight, and then we'll have some ongoing conversation. The goal of tonight is really simple. It's one, to tell you how we got here, but then not to stay there forever, but then also to talk about how we move forward, because ultimately that's the goal. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis to talk a little bit about how we got here.
Thank you, Lynette, and good evening, everybody. I echo the council member and Lynette's thanks for spending some time with us this evening. I'm Dennis Richards. I have the honor to serve as the Vice President of Housing Policy and Development for the Beltline, and my work focused on housing production, but also on planning and development of Beltline-owned property. We currently own over 80 acres of property right now, and so we're doing this process across the city. You know, what I wanted to do today, as Lynette mentioned, is just give you all a better understanding of how we got here, where, you know, as far as having to terminate a contract and to move on from the prior development group, but also wanted to focus on current state and next steps. You know, as you saw on that last slide, we're affirming our commitment, as Councilmember Dozier mentioned, to redevelop the Murphy Crossing site. We want to be clear about that. We recognize that, you know, over the last month or so, since the beginning of the year, there's been a lot of different storylines and speculation. And so we hope to clear up quite a bit of that today and be as transparent as possible. Our aim is not only to bring clarity on the termination, but again, really get us to a place where we're focused on next steps, and you all will be a substantial part of our next steps. With that, ABI did make a very difficult decision in December to terminate our purchase and sale contract with the prior developers, Cul-de-sac Incorporated and Urban Oasis Development. That was a purchase and sale contract for land associated with the first phase of development. Ultimately, we were unable to reach deal terms with them, and while you know, it didn't work out, we greatly do appreciate their efforts and the work they put in. We wish them well in their future business endeavors. We ended that contract in December, and contractually we had a quiet period. And so we were not able to talk about it until the end of January. And so unfortunately, that quiet period allowed for certain storylines and messaging to swirl about. And subsequent to January, we were then able to release some statements and respond to various inquiries, much of which I'm sure you all may have read about. Nonetheless, we want to be clear for the reasons of the termination, and as you see on the screen, our primary reasons for terminating were directly attributed to material changes to the project, and so we're going to show you some examples of that, excessive project delays, and the inability to secure necessary capital to advance pre-development activities as well as the development of the project in an expeditious manner. These factors, in addition to the inability to move certain activities like the planning, the entitlement, and financing activities concurrently, gave us little confidence that they would be able to advance all phases of this development project in a timely manner and successfully deliver all of the promises made to you throughout their presentations and as well as within their proposal from when they responded to our request for proposals. So with that, we ultimately made the decision to move on, terminate the contract, and we just couldn't agree to the proposed project changes they made. There were material changes to the project. There were initially in their proposals 2 phases of development that were planned, and that ballooned to 6 phases. In addition, there were significant changes to the phase itself. So you had what started at 300 units of development in the first phase dwindle down to a third of that, 105 units proposed. And so with all of that, that increased the risk of developer non-performance in the later phases of the development. Also, what I'll show you is that there were excessive and ambiguous requests for public capital. So you hear me talk about public incentives and public benefits. And so when we think about these deals, unlike a traditional investor, return on public money is the public benefits. And so that will be affordable housing, the amount of affordable housing, the level of affordable housing, affordable commercial spaces, job creation, and so on. When you hear me say public incentives or public capital, those are real dollars that ABI, Invest Atlanta, the Atlanta Development Corporation, or other public agencies have to come up with and put into a deal to make it financially feasible. So just wanted to be clear about that. And so we saw with the reduction in units, with the increase in phases, a lot of what was promised in terms of public benefits being essentially backloaded in the deal, making it more risky and less probable that those phases could be developed, if at all. Additionally, there was significant delays to the project, and so when we were negotiating this deal with the developers, many of you recognize when you bought your home, you had an inspection period. You probably had 30 days to negotiate, to go in and inspect your property. So you got a title report, you got environmental done, whatever it would have been. They gave you 30 days. Well, when we were negotiating, we gave a license agreement to allow the developers on the property to start their inspections. This was before we even got in the contract. We also run our own title. We did survey, we did environmental. We had a whole host of documents that we also provided to them, so they didn't start from zero. Once we signed the purchase and sale agreement, we gave them 120 days or 4 months to complete their inspection period. And ultimately what we saw was there was a series of 6 separate amendments requested by them to extend the inspection period from 120 days to over 280 days. And so ultimately, that was delaying the project. It's a day-for-day delay of advancing entitlement work and other activities on the project to get us to a closing. To us, these were also indications that the developers likely had insufficient capital to advance all of the pre-development activities that were required. So by delaying in the inspection period, it therefore delayed their capital requirements. And so, it should also be noted that despite all that time elapsing, they were never able to produce any term sheets or true financing commitments to us to evidence that they could indeed finance the project. Let me see, next slide. So here, we just wanted to put together a concise table just to give you a sense. Again, this is phase one. So when we say we entered into a purchase and sale contract, that was for phase one. We were going to offer them site control across all phases, but the contract was for phase one. And so they initially in their proposal, you can see, well, let me start at the top. You can see the timeline and how it progressed over an extenuated negotiating period. And then in that first row, you can see initially in their proposal, 310 units. Well, we thought we had a deal despite it changing up through June and the summer. You can see the deal progressively got smaller, where we're going to do a single phase of about 160 homes for sale. Also, we were agreeable along the way that, they could increase the amount of phases from 2 to 6 phases. However, I'll draw your attention to the second row. You can see that their capital requests increased and then remained pretty high at $12 million. Well, in November, just before the holidays, when we thought we had given them about a $10 million incentive package to help get this first phase going, it was kind of dropped on us that they were proposing they then revise the development for phase one down to only 105 units. Again, by doing this, you're deferring all those public benefits to later phases and creating future phases that might be more difficult to finance. And so that said, we were also at that point in our 6th extension, and ultimately we were unable to be agreeable to that. And so we decided that it'd be more of a more efficient use of public capital if we took a different approach to this, and which I'll share a little bit more about in future slides. Also, we'll show you, as you see on the bottom of the slide there, it was their initial proposal was agnostic to how much capital they would need to advance all phases of development on this site. And you should know that, we aren't profit motivated at ABI. While ABI owns the property, we look at it as the public owns that property, and the value of that property, we're willing to take some concessions on that to induce that package of public benefits, meaning that we would offer below market terms. And so the number you see on the bottom there, that doesn't account for favorable land terms. It also doesn't account for real estate tax incentives that would have been available to them via Invest Atlanta or the Atlanta Urban Development Corporation. And so they have financing tools like lease purchase bonds and private enterprise agreement, where in multifamily deals, you're able to get essentially real estate tax exemptions on affordable housing units. So those are large numbers that don't take into account those other very significant incentives. And it was the math behind it was never very clear to us. And when we ran our numbers, we couldn't quite justify it. So again, being fiduciaries of public capital for us, it's important that we look at ways to deploy capital as efficiently as possible. And so we've just, again, decided to take a different approach. And so what I'm going to do is pass it for Q&A, or we'll do some polls and then open it up for questions on that piece, and then we'll get into next steps.
You can leave it right there at that slide.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nathan Soldat. I'm the Director of Community Engagement. I welcome you all to the space as well. We did a poll earlier. It's actually going to be the same process. So we have a few polls sprinkled throughout this evening, but just as a quick reminder in case we have folks just joining us, if you're on Facebook, feel free to participate in the comments. If you're on the Zoom platform, the poll should be popping up now for you to participate. And for y'all in the room, we have some survey cards where we're kind of working our way through the survey throughout the presentation. Please turn those survey cards in at the front desk when the meeting is complete. So the first question is, does this information provide greater clarity regarding our decision to end the contract? So we'll give folks a little bit of time.
And if they have comment cards. Okay. Okay.
Just in from my team here, we also have 39 folks on Zoom, 7 on Facebook, 21 have checked into the meeting. So looks like we're growing a little bit as the evening progresses. We'll go to the next poll question, please. All right, are there other unanswered questions that you have? And while you're writing that, let me just give you a preview. After this poll question, we're going to jump into probably about a 15 or 20-minute question and answer session, and I'll tell you how that's going to work from a logistical standpoint. And then we want to present some additional information and reserve the rest of the meeting for questions, comments, and conversation. So we'll give folks a little more time on that. Another little tidbit here is that you also have little tiny square comment cards. We'll be using those for the question and answer session. All right, so let's just jump in. We're going to talk a little bit about how this is going to function. So we have 3 audiences, you all in the room, Facebook, and Zoom. So for our in-person attendees, you should have a pin. You should have been provided 3 comment or question cards. You can fill these out at any point during the meeting. You can just put your hand up in the air, and somebody from our staff is going to collect them. That's how we're receiving questions and comments. If you run out of cards, let us know, and we can provide you with additional ones. From our Zoom audience, the Q&A box should be open at this point. You can type your questions and comments in there. You can also upvote other people's questions and comments if you want to. And then we have our Facebook Live audience. We have somebody on our staff who's monitoring the comments, and we're pulling those questions out, and we're going to feed those into the conversation. So what we're trying to do is manage 2 places at once. I'm sure most of you have experienced this in some way, shape, or form in the last few years. What we're going to do is we're going to take all that information and we're feeding it into basically a document that I can see here so that I try to intersperse between the room and the folks who are not in the room. So that's what we're trying to balance here. The other thing that we're trying to accomplish is if we get more questions and we get to 8 o'clock and we have run out of time, we have documented all of your questions and we can post those online with answers on a document on our website. So there will be no question or comment that we're not able to address in that scenario. So hopefully that all makes sense. And I'm going to go to my spreadsheet here. Oops. There we go. All right. Boy, that's small. Let me make it a little bit bigger here. All right. And yeah, just hold up your cards when you get them. And staff, you may even want to come down below if you can't see the hands. So we're going to go to the first question. This is from an in-person attendee, so I'll be announcing that as we go too. Can we make sure that this project does not have to go through zoning because it has already been through zoning? Dennis?
Yeah, good question. It hasn't been gone through the full zoning process, so there's been legislation introduced by the council member to have it rezoned, and it did receive an MPU vote of approval to be rezoned to IMIX, and the zoning review board has approved it, and the process was then stalled out. So not to get too far in the weeds, but the next step will be to take this to development of regional impact review. From there, it will go to zoning council and then city council. We're not going to rush that process. And we're jumping ahead to the next step, so I won't preempt my remarks, but I'll tell you a little bit more about the next steps for the zoning process. We do intend to make it a very inclusive process with you all along the way. If you've been following our work over in Pittsburgh Yards, it'll look and feel much like that planning process.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Dennis. The next question is from somebody in our Zoom audience. Question is, why did ABI award this deal to Cul-de-sac to begin with? A developer with no track record in Atlanta, limited track record in hometown Tempe, undercapitalized and inexperienced, urban oasis the same, etc. That's the question that was asked.
Okay. You want to? You can take it.
Let me say this because I want to be clear. Just because the development partner didn't work for this doesn't mean they're not a good developer. So I want to just say that straight way, right?
Thank you.
This isn't that. This isn't saying that they're not great development. In this context, in these circumstances, based off of what he just shared, it wasn't a match for us. That doesn't mean that they don't do great work other places. So I just want to say that.
Thank you for that, Lynette.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. And I think they put forward a great proposal. And, I think if it would have been able to been realized, it would have been incredible. But unfortunately, it was just, it was more than what we believe they were able to execute on this site. So unfortunately, we just had to make that decision to move on. But they still have other development projects that have been successful, and I expect they'll have others.
Yeah.
Great. Next question I'm going to ask is, I just lost it. Here we go. Moving forward, will there be another round of RFQs or RFPs? And for the room, those are requests for qualifications or requests for proposals. What are changes to the process that will give us different outcomes?
So I'm going to talk about those changes in my upcoming remarks, so I don't want to preempt that. But I will say that last year we put forward what we refer to as a request for qualifications. And so what we did intentionally was we were seeking quality developer partners that can essentially sit on the bench and wait for opportunities that we could put out on the street. And so we already have a number of folks, some single family folks, those that specialize in mixed use and multifamily, looking for opportunities. And so as we plan this site, we're going to develop a development plan that'll discuss how it'll be phased and all the parts and of the pieces of the site, if you will, that'll be put out to certain developers. And Murphy Crossing is an opportunity to do quite a bit with new construction, adaptive reuse, single family, multifamily.
Thank you, Dennis. The next question is from an in-person attendee. Will there be availability to cross the tracks from Oakland City? I think that's probably a connectivity question.
So I have to cross those tracks to go to church every week, and they're a problem. So we're definitely having conversations about how that connection's improved. There will also be, obviously the Beltline. I'll talk a little bit about some intentional spur trail connections. We're looking to make, multimodal connections. We'll talk about that more in our next steps.
And we know that's on the city's radar too. Like that's been a point of a desire that communities wanted to see for years. I mean, since I started the Beltline 13 years ago, and that still hasn't got resolution. So it's going to take a lot of parties to get it there.
All right, thank you, Lynette. Some of these questions are going to be better answered after we cover the next set of slides, but I'm still going to hit a few that are more relative to what we just heard.
Okay.
Of course, I move around and I lose them. All right, here we go. Did the RFP make realistic assumptions about a feasible capital raise? Are these RFPs being set up for failure? If not realistic?
Yeah, so the RFP, when it was put out for Murphy Crossing, number one, it was, to my understanding, put together with the community, and you can maybe speak to that. Mm-hmm. It was an RFP that required a developer to do everything soup to nuts, and what I mean by that, that's come in, do the initial community engagement, pull together a site plan, entitle it, and then do everything from horizontal to vertical construction across all phases. And obviously that will require them raise all the necessary capital. That's a big undertaking on a 20-acre site such as this. And so, again, we're focused on how do we execute this vision that the community helps to craft as expeditiously as possible. And so I think we have a good plan in place, and I'll highlight that on the next few slides.
All right, I'd like to actually move to the next few slides, and we only have a few more slides. So basically we'll spend the rest of tonight having this conversation, and I have quite a few questions that really are forward leaning in terms of what the next steps are.
Well, that's good, because that's where we want to focus our time and attention with you all. As far as where we are currently, again, I'm going to keep saying it, but we remain committed to advancing this project. It's one of our top priorities, and it will remain just that. We're currently developing a community engagement plan and timeline that will include regular meetings such as this. And we want you all to help get, your neighbors and everybody out to these meetings. Lynette will also speak at the end a bit about our community engagement process, but it obviously involves the neighborhood associations, our MPUs as well, and our engagement will go through the planning of the site, the entitlement, and then also throughout the development processes. We're also currently assembling a planning team, and so we have to go through some procurement processes for that, but we'll have a planner, a civil engineer, and some analysts on board to help us throughout our planning exercises. And these aren't just pretty art projects when we do this. There's some science behind it. We obviously need to take into account what is feasible in the market. And then we also have to look at, what can actually be financed and is feasible. And so all of those are kind of concurrent exercises that we do throughout the planning process. And we'll, as that process iterates, we come back before you, we share that information, and we bring our team. So you won't hear me doing all the talking. You actually hear our civil engineer and our planning team, and you'll be able to ask our analysts certain questions. There was also wanted to mention that next quarter, in the second quarter, we will kick off our design team for the spur trail. I'm sure you all probably heard that there's been plans of a conceptual spur trail. Well, that's becoming more of a reality, and that will connect Oakland City MARTA all the way up to Aline, so easy access through the Murphy Triangle to get to Oakland City MARTA from Adair Park. Also just recently, pleased to announce the commitment to Atlanta Land Trust. For those of you that may be familiar, at 1024 Donnelly, they're developing trust at Oakland City. It's a townhome development. And so we've made a financial commitment there to put a small spur trail through that property to allow our Oakland City and Bush Mountain residents to have more direct and easier access directly to the Beltline main line. And so those dollars will be deployed by the summer, and they're actively in construction. As we look forward to next steps, I mentioned that, the developer was previously tasked with doing it all. That will be no more. Going forward, ABI will serve as the master developer or master planner for this site. So we're going to develop a full master plan with you all. We're also going to develop a unified development plan that will speak to how the deal will be phased and executed. And we will then select partners that are specific, that have a specific skill set to execute that function on the property. And so if we're doing single family, we're gonna, our goal at ABI will be to make investments in the dirt. So we'll invest in roads, walks, we'll grade out the site, we'll put utilities in. We'll do our best to get a pad-ready site to a partner so they can go and execute on the vertical construction. So we'll do that across the property. We also had a question as far as the zoning and entitlement goes. As I mentioned, the site has received ZRB approval to be rezoned to IMIX. We're not going to restart that. But what we are going to do is develop a full site plan, and we want to do that in connection with the neighborhood associations and the community. And that plan will then go through a DRI review and then continue on through to get rezoned. And so it would be my hope that by fourth quarter, I think we have on a tight timeline, by September, October, perhaps we can go and get that city council approval and be rezoned to IMIX. We're certainly intending to do all of that this year. I mentioned that we did an RFQ, so we essentially have kind of a bench of developers that we can go to now and put opportunities out to. We want to expand that net too. If there are other good partners out there, we want to work with them. Once we've kind of come up with that development plan and that site plan, we will put out RFPs specific to that portion of the property to builders and developers, and then we'll execute and negotiate documents with those individual parties. And we see a world in which we can run certain development activities concurrently, as long as it's feasible and the market will allow it. Let's see here. talked a little bit about this timeline, but this will kind of ground you in what we're thinking. So, again, next quarter, we're going to come back. We're going to do some meetings like this. You'll meet our team. So we'll have a planner, civil, and at least a market analyst on board at that time. We're not going to necessarily start over. There were a lot of good elements of that last plan. We're going to pull those out, and we're going to begin to iterate a new site plan. By third quarter, we are hopeful, that will put us like end of September. We hope to be out of zoning, and then be in a position where we can get an RFP out as early as probably third, fourth quarter to get our first partner potentially. Next year, we're going to be in land disturbance planning and permitting phases, and then aggressive timeline, but by the end of next year, there's a path in which we could potentially have a shovel in the ground for the first phase of development. And that'll be more than likely ABI leading that portion of the work. We'll be putting in roads and grading out the site and doing some demolition. I'll pause there. Lynette, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the community engagement process going forward.
Sure, and so just like tonight, we'll have a series of community engagement. So we have a stakeholder group, which is representative of the neighborhoods as well, but then we'll also do deeper neighborhood engagement. As a part of this overall development, it was always intended that not only to have a technical a stakeholder committee, but a technical advisory committee, which is made up of agency partners, and also a business component as well that we need to get off the ground. So we'll be activating those throughout the process. It's typically our process before we have a public meeting that we have a stakeholder meeting, like we did like 2 weeks ago. So you'll have that meeting, and the intention of that group is to serve kind of as a sounding board or vetting, if you will, to let us know what are the questions, what's outstanding, what's missing, what's confusing, to get us ready for the public meeting. So that's why this was shown 2 weeks ago. Those stakeholder meetings are still open to the public for visibility. So if you still wanted to listen into those, you're welcome to as well. Nathan is our community engagement director. And so we will be working closely to come up with a plan, and working with some of you we've already had conversations with about getting deeper engagement. How do we reach not just the people who've been here for the last 20, 30 years, but the people who've been here 40, 50 years, right? We want to make sure that we're hearing from all the voices in this process. So you'll get to a point, and we'll be here afterwards as well, as you have questions or recommendations about, hey, there's a series of seniors on our street. If we can help us in any way get the word out. I was telling Ms. Walker before the meeting, we had kind of abandoned flyers once the pandemic happened, right? And now we realize, as we've kind of got back into the world of things in public meetings, that those still are necessary for some. And so if you want to be a point person for your street to help get the word out to some seniors that please let us know. We would appreciate that fact. We don't know what we don't know, right, in terms of neighbors on the street. So we'll have deeper engagement. Some of you saw the right-of-way signs. We'll be deploying a lot of different ideas to make it convenient for people to not only get out, but to participate. Did you want to add anything?
No, thank you, Lynette. Is that what you... Okay, no.
Okay. Oh, well, there you go. I wasn't paying attention.
I was ready. All right, this is our last poll question within the live meeting, if you will. But you can see it really piggybacks off of what Lynette was talking about. We have a lot of ideas, but we want to hear your ideas. So what ideas do you have for strengthening community engagement? And as you were talking, I was thinking about some ambassadors.
Yeah.
And you kind of said it there. I know we've had a lot of great feedback from Judy and others in the community. So while you're writing this question down, or while you're putting your thoughts down, if you'd like to be somebody who shares information in your neighborhood, just put your contact information there. If you're not comfortable there, come see me after the meeting or the sign-in table. Let's just try to get the word out in every way we can. And any other ideas that y'all have, we are open to them. There's no such thing as perfect community engagement. And we are trying to improve our processes, and we need your help with that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give a little more space for that. But while I do that, I'm going to reiterate our format for the rest of the evening, just so you guys have time to write. And in case we have anyone that has just joined us at this point, we're doing the same thing, and we're doing it till 8 o'clock, or unless you guys run out of questions. But we are, if you're in the room, write down your question, your comment on a comment card. put it up in the air, and somebody from our staff is going to come grab that. If you run out of cards, you have not run out of the ability to participate in this conversation. Please let our staff, raise your hand, let our staff know you need some more cards. If you are on one of our virtual platforms, the Q&A box is back open again. Read other people's comments and questions, upvote if you want. Again, those are being fed to me just like everything else to this little document up here. The last thing is, of course, our Facebook Live audience. Just throw it in the comments. We will scrape it out of there, we'll pull it out of there, and we will add that to the mix. All right. So as we do that, we are going to jump back into our Q&A. As I forgot my mouse, and I'm not good with the trackpad, so that's my excuse for tonight. I apologize. I'm a little slow on it. All right. We're going to do some sort of what next step stuff. Some of these questions were addressed or partially addressed in your slides, Dennis, but I want to try to hit them again as much as possible.
Okay.
And I think this first one is, we throw around a lot of acronyms and terms. That was pretty technical, but also, well thought out. We're asking now for some plain speak. What's the plan now? Please be straightforward and plain speak as possible.
Fair enough. So ABI is taking on more responsibility. And so what that means is that we're going to plan this property, again, with the community in mind and at the table. We're going to make investments in actually getting it developable. So what that means is we're going to we're going to grade out the site, as mass grading. We're going to put in roadways and walks that are necessary for the development. And we're also going to put in utilities like water, sewer, buried electrical power, and bring that to a pad. When I say a pad, that's just a plot of land that we can then build houses on. So then I'll just bring in a builder, and they go forth and build. Is that clear?
It's pretty clear to me. We can kind of build off this again in plain speak. How is ABI going to avoid a similar situation with future partners?
Yeah, I think we're going at risk. So the process I described to you is ABI taking on a lot of risk and responsibility. And so with that, it's a much smaller bite at the apple for a potential partner. And also, we're looking for folks with a strong track record. There are a lot of great developers in and around Atlanta and in the state of Georgia, several of which have already been pre-qualified with us. So we'll look at doing business with folks such as that.
Thank you, Dennis. Going to keep building off that. Are we going to be the developer? Is ABI going to be the developer? And, Lynette, myself, how much more planning, community engagement is going to be involved? Do we know how many phases there will be?
We will be essentially a co-developer. So you can think any type of development team that is assembled, parties within that team take on certain responsibilities. And so for us, we're going to co-develop because, like I said, we're going to make those direct investments in the site itself. And we're going to bring those to the deal. And then we'll bring in another developer or a builder to execute on the vertical, so to build the edifice itself. You want to address the other piece? What was the other part about me?
The other part was how much more planning, community engagement is involved.
So there'll be a lot more community engagement through, the DRI process. And if you were involved in the original...
What's a DRI?
The development of regional impact. That's typically done when you're doing your rezoning. So you get the zoning, the DRI, and then you go through and get your NPU or zoning NPU approval. It was a little done in reverse, and we want to make sure that, which is fine. What we want to make sure we do, though, is through the DRI process, come back to the community and especially walk through any changes to the site plan, because that was actually a promise, too, that through the DRI process there would be engagement throughout, so maintaining that commitment throughout that process.
And do we know how many phases we're expecting in this next go-around?
No. But, that'll be flushed out throughout the planning process.
When you get a development team on and...
Correct.
You mentioned some of the outside assistance, I think, that we would receive. And so the question is, will any private sector firms or individuals be consulting during ABI's next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the private sector is very instrumental in the process. So, we'll have a private planning firm that will work with us to plan the site. We'll have a market analyst. We also get an independent financial analyst to help look at deal feasibility, help us. You can't build a Taj Mahal, right? And so those types of analysts help calibrate us, and then obviously a civil engineer as well.
Thank you, Dennis. Will ABI change their goals for Murphy Crossing since the announcement of the West End redevelopment, as well as the infill MARTA station?
I would say, we're going to keep the goals consistent with what we've heard from the community. And so we've heard, that we need affordable housing, that there needs to be ample commercial space, retail and services. There needs to be job creation, and the IMIC zoning designation allows for there to be light industrial space that will invite job creation. And so those are kind of the hallmarks of the plan that will be maintained. How it looks and works on the site and how things get moved around, I think is more of the art to it.
Okay, I'm going to move a little bit into possibly federal funding as well. So, the question is, does the current uncertainty of federal funds that were awarded to ABI affect Murphy Crossing in any way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of folks around the country are dealing with uncertainties right now regarding federal funds and other matters that impact construction. So, it isn't just that. I mean, you got potential impact on the supply chain, tariffs on lumber, potentially the labor markets. These are all things that we have to address head on as we encounter them. That said, as far as federal grants to ABI, I think our CEO would say that, we got a plan to address that. One thing I think in my work that is helpful is these properties have a tremendous value. The public has a tremendous amount of equity in these properties, and so we can come up with financial mechanisms to extract some of that value that will allow us to advance our work. And so we're looking at those options.
All right, we're going to kind of reference back to the first set of slides and look backwards a little bit for a moment before we go back forward again. How did you look into the two companies' financials before agreeing to negotiate with them and spend time working with them?
Yeah, so, not to pass the buck, this was, that was...
Predated you.
Yeah, you want to...
I mean, right, but I know, right? Just
Not to put you...
No, I don't have that kind of detail. I mean, I'm sure when RFPs or RFQs go out, there's a certain level of vetting that the people who are involved in making that decision take into consideration. I don't have that specific information, in all honesty, so that is something that we could follow up to see how much is taken in consideration.
What I can tell you is there was a evaluation committee, and there were requirements under the RFP. They did have to submit their financial capabilities statements, as well as references and other things. So there was definitely a vetting, even visits to their properties that they were developing elsewhere. So that certainly occurred, and for all intents and purposes, those boxes were checked at that time.
Thank you.
Request
great
for
question.
proposal or RFQ, request for qualifications. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Who will be in charge of securing new bids? This is a three-part question. I'm going to actually go one at a time. So who will be in charge of securing new bids?
Mm-hmm.
That'll go through ABI's procurement process.
Mm-hmm.
Did ABI visit cul-de-sac in Arizona before entering this agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
And were the interest rates a factor?
Yeah, I mean, interest rates are always a factor in any deal. If you haven't closed your financing, you're subject to market conditions. And so, yes, as interest rates rise, that has a direct impact on the amount of debt a property can leverage. And so you got to fill that gap somewhere, or your deal might need to be modified a bit.
All right. Is there any priority being given to the Murphy Crossing site within ABI and the City of Atlanta circles for the success of the site? It seems like sites in Southwest Atlanta have continuously been plagued with delays and false starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I reiterated that to the point where I don't know if y'all want to hear it again, but yes, it does remain a top priority. I'll tell you the challenge right now in this market is, number one, multifamily is difficult to finance right now. It works in markets where you can charge really high market rents, which is not the case on the south side and west side. And so, therein lies the trouble. I mean, this is one of the reasons why a lot of development, specifically in the Murphy Triangle, hasn't been able to advance over the years. But the benefits we have is that we've got pretty low basis in the land. So we got quite a bit of equity in the land, which will allow us to make favorable land deals to make some of these deals feasible. In addition to that, like I mentioned, we're going to be making real financial investments in the dirt itself. So we'll be able to bring all of those improvements to a deal.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm going to try to break this one down a little bit as well. I believe the question is asking how many housing units are we projecting, and I guess what portion would be affordable or workforce housing?
Yeah, so we're going to, that gets into the minutia that, we're going to work through. If I just had to, previously this plan suggested 1,100 units of housing and about, at least 30% affordability across those units. So at or below 80% of area median income in a rental deal, or at or below, if I have it my way, it'll be 100% of AMI or less. I don't think that we would want to build any single family on this site priced above about $400,000. I think between $200,000 to $400,000 would be, the range of for sale. But again, that's just me speaking. There's a whole process that we'll go through, and you all will be involved to really help refine that. And our analysts will look at all of this, and they'll put together, our market analysts, they'll go and do they'll look at demand and capture rates and all of that on all the different product types we talk about. And our financial analysts will help us run the numbers to make sure it's something that can be financed.
Any sense on projected jobs?
Not yet.
Protected jobs?
Projected.
Projected jobs. Again, that's going to be a function of what actually the end product, right, that gets built. So we do expect there to be a significant amount of job creation. We're hopeful for that because of the light industrial components. And then also, we want to see plenty of retail and services as well. I know, I'm West Side resident myself, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Any thoughts or options for blended development that would include Avon Avenue?
Avon Avenue is a whole nother animal. I don't know. There was some fire damage to that building that we're working through right now. That is about a 230,000 square foot warehouse. We look at that definitely being a job anchor. We had some market analysis done that would suggest that would be the highest and best use for it. And so we'll be working next year to plan that site as well.
What about shipping containers, Dennis? Is there options for shipping containers in the development? For example, housing or common space, restaurant type shipping containers that create jobs?
I'm gonna take a wild guess who asked that. Okay, we got a shipping container builder in the house. Yes, definitely wouldn't rule it out. I'm open to the concept at this point in time. That's all I can give you on that.
Okay, speaking of interim, if I can, long list. You guys are really engaging. I appreciate this. Here it is. I found it. Can you open the space to the community in an incremental way during the process so people build, buy in, and it's less of a blight on the neighborhood? This would also be a way to create real community engagement and generate interest for tenants, et cetera.
Can I weigh in on? So that is something that we're exploring, how and in the possibilities around that. We do recognize that there's a certain amount of risk involved in a site that's not totally public ready. And so we're exploring all those options right now to see what could be done, a portion of the site. I know that's something I want to see, but I know we got to round that out and get all of the teams at ABI to kind of talk through that and see what the options are for an interim. We did not hear anything about breaking into the site, so we're going to act like we didn't hear that.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the procurement, the process, the best we can. I got a couple questions. When you say procurement process of ABI, what does that mean? What is the committee? Is the CEO involved? Is there a designated decision maker?
You want
Me
to
to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a formal procurement process at ABI and a team, and so typically what's been the experience is that they put out a request for proposals, or maybe in this case a request for qualifications, depending on what it is. Applicants get an opportunity to respond. There's a criteria set out, and that it outlines the scope, et cetera, the things it needs. That comes back. Depending on the nature of the RFQ, the request for qualifications, or the RFP, that depending on the scope, we then determine who is the best group to evaluate it. Now, in this particular case, you're talking about the purchase of a property. That kind of evaluation typically would involve the head of ABI, the VP of real estate, and a team of people from Invest Atlanta, right? Because that would be a certain level of responsibility that would come with C-suite purview. Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I would add that before decisions made as well, these typically go to the board.
Right.
And the boards would, be presented to the different respondents and the proposals with an understanding of why a recommendation for selecting a developer finalist is being made.
On that same note, will the public see drafts in process, or will there be a cone of silence phase again?
So the cone of silence comes in place after the RFP or request for proposal or request for qualifications is issued. While it's being drafted, if we do it like we did before, because one, there's a great template for what the goals were. I don't know if we intend on refining that, then that would be a part of the conversation that we would have with the community.
Correct, yeah, so essentially the RFP, request for proposals, will be drafted. That will be open book. We'll share that. And that should be in alignment with everything we will have discussed up until that point in time.
Right.
At which point it goes out. Once it is released, then there are statutorily certain requirements that we have to abide by, the procurement laws that require us to not discuss it to the point in which we make a selection.
Are you planning to start from scratch with a new developer? I know you addressed that a little bit. In other words, are you considering blue sky ideas, or is the goal to keep the previous components of the last plan, like restaurants, retail, housing units, promenade, etc.?
Yeah, so again, there are great elements to the previous plan that I think, should survive and, will survive. And then there will be some revisions that need to happen. And so, we're not tearing it up. We're not starting over. We're going to improve it, and we're going to come up with something that is actually feasible and that can be advanced.
And will ABI develop a site plan or overall design? I know you addressed that a little bit as well.
Yes.
A site plan. Sure.
Yeah, we'll have a site plan. There's certain design elements and certain attributes of a development that you don't want to be overly prescriptive. You want your developer to come in and be able to create something that they can execute as well. But obviously there are certain, such as the Beltline overlay, there are certain restrictions and things that any builder would have to abide by.
The next question is about ABI. Who is ABI? ABI is the Atlanta Beltline, Inc. Where are you based? We're based here in Atlanta. Have you been involved in the development, have you been involved in development throughout the Beltline?
Me personally.
Well, ABI, sorry.
Has ABI, I'm sorry.
Been involved in development throughout the Beltline?
Yeah, I mean, so.
And I assume this is sort of,
Oh, I think I get the nature of the question now.
like,
Yes.
are we a developer, I guess,
Yes,
is maybe a way
yes,
to think
okay,
of it.
thank you. So all of the horizontal development activities I'm discussing that we will do and perform on these sites, we have been doing. And so I think right now, 18 miles roughly of the 22-mile trail is either in construction or completed. And so that's, several $100 million of development that Beltline has executed on. So we're bringing that expertise to our Beltline adjacent properties that we own.
How long has ABI been in business? A little quiz for the evening. Not necessarily when the tax allocation district was created.
I'll give that one
Well,
to you, Lynette.
the district was 2005, and the organization was, Inc. was 2006.
I think,
Oh,
2006.
2006-ish, yes.
And this isn't being asked, but the Atlanta Beltline Inc., we are the organization charged with implementing the vision of the Beltline. So as Lynette went through that slide, sort of our Beltline 101, what we're charged to do is to basically implement everything you saw on that slide, either through our programs or through partnerships, and to do so with the voice of the community to help guide the implementation itself. The goals are preset, but that is the job of ABI. That was a really good question. I haven't been asked that question in a community meeting before. All right. When I talk, I can't read the questions ahead. I'm sorry. Okay, here's another one that I wanted to hit as well on the community engagement side. We cannot afford to go through a lengthy community engagement process again. How can we make sure that you're keeping the community's best interest at heart?
That's a great question. I mean, to be honest with you, I think, the community will be the judge in a lot of ways of whether we're keeping your interest at heart. So I'd say working closely with you. It has been a lengthy community engagement process to date, but what Dennis kind of outlined showed that, ideally we're trying to get to the end of the year in a perfect world with the DRI being complete. So we know at least the next several months. And so we'll rely on the community to give us feedback as to that.
Yeah, I think about it like this. We're not starting from scratch.
Right.
We're not throwing out everything that we've received from the community over the last few years, and actually much longer than that.
Yeah.
But we are going to make sure that we're engaged in the process and make sure that we still have it right. Tweak it if we need to, based off of feedback. You've already heard more of the technical side from Dennis about how we want to advance the site and make it as buildable as quickly as possible, might be a way to say it. So, we're going to do a lot of outreach. We're going to do it relatively fast because we've all been waiting to see this thing come out of the ground, but we also don't want to just go out there without having a public engagement process. This is one more opportunity, as well as there will be opportunities once a developer is selected as well, to make sure that this is a project that has been influenced and has been contributed to by the voice of the community, with marrying the project goals with what the community wants to see on the site. Okay, I don't know if you know this one, Dennis, but we'll give it a shot. This is a timeline related to West End Mall. Any guess if this project, Murphy Crossing, or West End Mall will begin construction first? Any similarities or differences that contribute to the first one getting out the gate?
I probably know enough to be dangerous on the West End Mall, but I haven't gotten an updated, a recent update on their timeline. I do expect them to get into some demolition, soon, if not this year, maybe next year. That's just me speculating. I did mention to those folks that, it's probably time they come before the community, and provide some updates. So we'll make sure we press them on that and look to try to help convene that conversation.
The next question, the individual feels that the PR engine of ABI was misleading. In other words, the big story was number of housing units decreased, but it was actually increased overall by cul-de-sac. Can you speak to that, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, what I was referring to was to show you in the first phase how it went from 300 units in 2 phases to just 100 units was their last proposal in November, and it was 6 phases. And so, yes, I do acknowledge that, you know, their proposal, they went to a car-free site plan that allowed to get up to 1,100 units of housing across 6 phases. But where I was pointing to was the risks associated with backloading all of the public benefits. If you create a deal where in phases 4, 5, and 6, those are your most expensive, your largest phases to develop, and you just do a little in those first few phases, well, it's inherent risk because you can't, no one has a crystal ball, and those deals are a lot more difficult to do. And so therein lie, the challenges, And so, if you just look at, for instance, phase 1, if we're talking 30% affordability, you went from initially practically getting, 90 to 100 affordable units down to only 30, in the first phase. And so those are promises deferred.
Thank you, Dennis. This is really more of a comment, but can we request that no breweries be part of the plan? Given the proximity to Lee and White, we deserve to have real restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great comment. It's a qualifying use under IMIX, which is Lee White is in IMIX, so that's why they have that. But yeah, definitely needs to be complementary uses. So, point taken.
Don't look at me, Lynette. I stopped drinking beer.
Safe space.
All right.
We listen, we don't judge. Go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. What is on the lots right now, if anything, can start to be built?
Yeah, so the former archives building right there at the corner, if you're familiar with the Beltline Marketplace, that building was built in the 80s, has good bones. It needs to obviously be renovated. But that is definitely targeted in an adaptive reuse. Mr. Pope's in the room. He's currently operating out of the large warehouse in the middle of the building, doing adaptive shipping container projects. So there is a functioning light industrial use right now on the site. We expect that farmers market, obviously, as historic. It's the former state farmers market. To the extent we can, we like to preserve that. There are other reasons why we would want to do that in order to meet the IMIX zoning requirements. Several of those buildings, however, are in disrepair and will be demolished.
All right, this is more feedback. Please provide more info and documents on your website and options for feedback. Not everyone can attend scheduled meetings. I've highlighted that as a follow-up for my team. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that comment. All right, we're going to move off of Murphy just a second. There's a question about the Donley site. Will the property adjacent to the townhomes on Donley be acquired, or do you have any plans for the property? Is this a land trust?
Oh, the land trust that you're
Yeah, I don't have any intent to acquire that property. I can't speak for the land trust.
This next question appears to be sort of a connectivity question. Which streets will the spur trail come down? I don't know if we're talking about the connectivity that was in the site plan.
So we have a conceptual alignment on our website, and so we'll get that if we can get that on the FAQ.
Yeah, and again, I don't know. This came from Zoom. For sure, the geography of the question. When I think of spur trail, there is a spur trail that comes off the South Side Trail now, terminating at a lean avenue, and we will be out in the community this year or early next year designing an extension of that would also get you to Oakland City, MARTA.
Right.
So that could be the origin of the question as well. All right. This one's kind of a long one, and I'm going to try to see what we can do here. At the stakeholder meeting 2 weeks ago, the question says the lots was divided into 5 or 6 segments. I'm thinking this is probably more of a phasing question. You mentioned DRI and zoning committee again. How can you make sure that all the permits committees stay on track, because we are in the environment of 2030, which is 4 years away, and federal funding and other programs are being cut by the new administration. I'm just kind of remixing this a little bit. Phasing, how can we make sure we stay on track with all the formal processes that we need to go through to bring the site forward, at the same time filling the cuts at the federal level?
I'll do my best with that, Nathan. I think, so as far as the phasing goes, again, that'll be more concrete as we go through the planning process. So there'll be a site plan and then a development plan. The development plan will speak to all of the nuances about how the development is executed, and who's doing what and when. And so, by the end of this year, we hope to have all of that developed, and that'll be kind of the guide in which we use to develop the property. As far as, I think they're suggesting, can all this be done by 2030? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes.
I think, can it be, it's going to take a while. I mean, this is 20 acres of development. I think to the extent we can, we're going to run things as concurrently as possible. I just don't, we have not developed any full project timelines at this point. Previously, the developers had intended, this was before all of the delays happened, they had projected development to go on through 2032. And so I think to the extent we can get everything kind of, under contract and going by 2030, we'll certainly try to maximize that. Construction may go beyond that.
Can we, I'm not sure that we can answer this question, but we're going to give it a shot. Can we alter railroad schedules so that trains cannot sit on the tracks for long periods of time? And I think that's a pretty hard thing to do.
Yeah, we can't answer that.
Okay.
I mean, but I will say that that's something that
It's fair, though.
Yeah,
something we've heard a lot.
Reoccurring throughout many conversations with the community. So that is something that we would use our elected officials to kind of help those conversations.
But what we can say, because the second part of this is that, it alters the ability to access Murphy Crossing. So this is ultimately an access question.
Yeah.
So, short of altering railroad schedules and not having that blockage there, Dennis, if you could take a crack at what kind of connectivity we're trying to have with the Beltline, because the Beltline itself goes underneath Lee and Murphy, and that is a direct connection, potentially.
Beltline does a lot of work with CSX, so I think, we can definitely do what we can, to advocate for the project with them. There's definitely already conversations about making improvements to that crossing. As far as modifying a CSX schedule, though, we can't make any promises there.
Okay. All right. We still got some time for a few more questions here. Will it include a grocery store? Comment alongside. Yes, please. It would be great to see a concept that could pay homage to the original farmers market. And this one came from Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that farmers market, there's definitely some opportunities to, create flexible community space where folks can, sell fresh fruit and widgets and whatever else.
What is a widget?
Consumer goods,
Thank you.
or what crafts or what have you. So I think, yes, that's a natural activation for a space like that. Whether a grocery store or something makes sense there, you have to look at the market as a whole. We're also having those same conversations, about a mile down the path over at Pittsburgh Yards as well.
And the market analysis will help let us know what and how large is feasible at a site.
Thank you. Will ABI consider direct sales of developed lots, both detached and attached housing, to qualified builders? If so, can ABI consider setting aside lots for builders who typically build between 12 and 36 homes per year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely opportunities to partner. We want to look for ways where we can, create some capacity building opportunities too for our qualified but smaller businesses. I think our preference will be, to do ground leases where we can. On a for sale product, we expect that we would have to, sell those lots. And for any deal where we have permanently affordable housing, it would follow like a land trust model where ABI would contribute the land. It would be ground lease for a nominal fee, and then the improvements would be sold at a discounted price in order to create an affordable for sale home. I would foresee that any for sale development on this, obviously our market analysts would tell us the velocity of sale that needs to happen. But that you would expect that to happen, 10 to 20 homes built at a time and then sold. And then, capital can then be realized and then kind of recycled into the next project.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm going through. All right, we have gotten to every question. Wait, hold on a second. I missed one. Does ABI have a go no go on this property?
A go no go.
What does that mean?
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means.
So whoever wrote that, hang back at the end. We'd love to talk to you one-on-one to understand your question a little bit better at the end.
I'm feeling old. I don't know about y'all.
You don't know. No.
Maybe it's a young term that I don't know. Okay. All right. So we've covered every question between the three audiences that we can cover at this point this evening. So we're going to go ahead and transition with a little bit of meeting wrap up. Lynette's going to bring us home.
Again, just want to thank everyone for participating tonight. This is the first of a series of meetings that we will have. Just a matter of housekeeping. You completed a survey when you came in that said what neighborhood you were in. You wrote some comments on that. You're going to indicate if you want to be an ambassador to help get the word out, put your name and contact information. Please turn that in at the front desk where you came in. There'll be people there as well. Similarly, if you had some residents that aren't on social media or weren't able to participate in Zoom and you want to give them a copy of the presentation, one is available on our website at atlantabeltline.org / and they'll drop that in the chat where that is on Zoom. But we also have some copies as well to take with you. And so with that, we thank you for being here this evening. All of our contact information is there. See a lot of familiar faces in the room, so you already know how to get in contact with us. But I also see some faces that I haven't seen before. Who? Oh. That one? Okay, thank you. And we have some faces we have not seen before, so please be sure to either come see us, take our information down so that we can stay in communication throughout the process. Otherwise, have a great evening, and thank you again for being here tonight.
And we need to be out of the space by 8:30.
Okay, and then, yes.
There's food probably up there as well.
So there's some housekeeping. I should have said this at the top. The bathrooms are in the back. There's some additional food over there to grab some on the way out. And then we do have a deadline by the facility to be out by 8:30. So we just thank you for being here this evening.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.